I stood on the platform in Vermont, clutching my lukewarm coffee and train ticket. The trees across the tracks were a vibrant mix of gold and red, just as I'd envisioned when I planned this trip. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary trip. Meticulously organized, paid for, and timed to coincide with their favorite season, I handed the agent my ticket. He scanned it, his brow furrowed. "This one's already been checked in," he said. I blinked. "I'm sorry." He turned the scanner towards me as if it would clarify everything. "Checked in this morning, passenger already boarded." "That's not possible." I insisted, but even as the words left my mouth, a knot began to tighten in my stomach. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my brother, Brian. Tiff really wanted to see the fall colors. "You don't even like crowds." We figured it made sense. I stared at the message, then watched the train pull away without me. I didn't call or reply. I just stood there, holding coffee I no longer wanted, surrounded by the trip I had meticulously arranged for people who didn't think I needed to be there. Tiffany had taken my seat. Tiffany, Brian's girlfriend of 6 months, once filmed a TikTok in my guest bathroom using my toothbrush. And I was an afterthought. Worse, I was a placeholder they'd quietly erased. The most painful part wasn't that they left me, it was that no one even thought to tell me. I used to believe that being dependable was a virtue. Growing up, I was the one who cleaned up after dinner without being asked, the one who earned straight A's while Brian barely scraped by with late homework and charm. When our dad, Robert, lost his job the year I turned 16, I picked up shifts at the diner and unquestioningly gave every dollar to my mom, Carol. She called me her Little Rock, a title I wore with pride. Brian, on the other hand, was the baby, the one they always claimed just needed more time. He crashed the car twice before he turned 20 and never paid for either repair. Yet, when he got a C in microeconomics, Mom shed tears of pride. "He's trying so hard," she'd say. When Brian got into community college, I covered his books. When he dropped out, I helped him find a job. When he lost it a month later, I co-signed his lease and made the payments when he didn't. He moved in, and out of my guest room were times that I could count, always with some new excuse. Tiffany was just the latest iteration of his life lived at someone else's expense. I never voiced a complaint. As a systems analyst, I earned good money. I convinced myself I was helping, telling myself that's what good daughters do. Besides, if I didn't step up, who would? Mom never directly asked me to foot the bills. She had a different approach. "Your brother's doing his best, honey. It's tough out there for young people. You're lucky to have a stable career. Not everyone has." Your sense of responsibility. I don't think she ever truly thanked me, but she always made it clear she expected it. And when I gave, it was never framed as a gift. It was simply what I did, who I was: reliable, strong, capable. Over the years, it became easier to embody that person than to question why no one else was. I didn't plan the anniversary trip to prove anything. I planned it because they had once mentioned honeymooning near the Berkshires, because Mom's face lit up whenever fall arrived, and because Dad still kept the old Polaroid from that trip in his dresser drawer. I thought that maybe if I gave them something beautiful, they would finally see me, not just what I could offer. But looking back now, I realized they saw exactly what they always had. Not a daughter, but a solution. It started with an idea on a yellow sticky note, Berkshire's October. I'd scribbled it in the margin of my work planner after Mom mentioned over coffee how she and Dad had honeymooned in a tiny inn near Lenox with creaky floors and maple syrup on the windowsill. That afternoon, I began researching fall foliage tours. Within a week, I had everything booked. Scenic rail passes through New England, a 2-night stay in a historic inn with vineyard views, and a private dinner reservation at the same restaurant they'd visited 40 years ago. I even upgraded their rooms to include a fireplace. Just like before, I wrote on the itinerary card I planned to surprise them with. I didn't need anything fancy for myself. I booked a small room at a roadside motel and traveled coach class. On the train, the entire trip came to just under $9,000, covering everything: transportation, meals, activities, and even a bouquet of fresh asters and goldenrod for their anniversary dinner. I used PTO to fit it between 2 major client deadlines and rearrange my calendar for the next 6 weeks to ensure I wouldn't miss a beat at work. Brian wasn't part of the original plan. Mom had said he might be too busy with some freelance thing, which usually meant doing nothing in his apartment while Tiffany practiced TikTok dances in the background. I didn't press it. Truthfully, I had envisioned this as a quiet trip, a moment for them to breathe, and for me, perhaps not to impress them, but to remind them I was present, that I still cared. It wasn't about proving my worth. I'd stopped chasing that years ago, but a part of me hoped this might be the thing that stuck, a memory they'd discuss at Thanksgiving, a photo they'd frame and actually send me a copy of a small crack in the wall between us. It was never about the train ride or the hotel. It was about the table I set, the effort I poured in, the hope I still foolishly harbored. And somehow, it still wasn't enough to secure a seat. A week before the trip, I received a text from Mom. Tiff said her fall content would look amazing up there. Brian thinks it'd be fun if we added them. Is that okay? There was no mention of where they'd stay, how they'd get there, or who would pay. Just the assumption that I'd make it work. I stared at the message for a while before replying, "If the rooms can still be adjusted, I'll try." That's all I said. Not because I was upset yet, but because I understood how this game worked. Every request came cloaked in pleasantries, framed as spontaneous, and always, somehow, it became my responsibility to smooth it out. I checked the reservation site that night. The inn was nearly full. I managed to secure another room nearby, small and overpriced. Still, I booked it. Then I emailed the train company to confirm the seating. Our cabin could hold 4. Any more would necessitate shifting to a different car. I asked them to hold our original reservation. I didn't hear back from Mom again, not about logistics, not about anything. The group chat fell silent. A few days later, I saw Tiffany post an Instagram story, a pair of brown leather boots and the caption, "Can't wait for fall adventures." The boots were on my living room floor. She hadn't asked before taking the picture. Something within me tightened, but I let it go because that's what I did. Even as unease crept in, I convinced myself it would be fine, that I was being sensitive, that they wouldn't just cut me out. They wouldn't. I stayed on the platform long after the train vanished around the bend. The sky was soft with morning mist, and the trees swayed in slow motion as if oblivious to the hollow ache blooming in my chest. My suitcase sat beside me, untouched, pointless. No one called, no one texted again. Not Brian, not Mom, not even a generic "sorry for the mix-up." I wasn't part of the mistake. I was the mistake. And Tiffany, she got the scenic view, the curated experience. The seat I had reserved for months while building an itinerary they never asked for but happily accepted. I didn't cry, not then. I walked to the cafe across from the station, ordered another coffee I didn't want, and sat by the window, watching strangers board buses to places I hadn't planned for. I scrolled through social media. Brian had posted a photo, Mom and Dad smiling on the train platform, arms linked with Tiffany's. The caption read, "Family fall getaway." Finally making memories together. The word "together" struck harder than I expected, as if it purposefully excluded me, as if they had finally achieved a picture-perfect version of themselves now that I was gone. I didn't comment. I didn't like the photo. I just locked my phone and stared at the tabletop, tracing the scratches in the wood as if they could offer answers. They didn't look at me. They made a choice, and I needed to make one too. I didn't go home. Instead, I rented a car and drove north. No plan, no GPS, just a vague memory of a quiet town I'd once passed through on a solo work trip. It was called Brattleboro. Small, nestled in the folds of Vermont, the kind of place where no one asked questions and the air smelled like pine. I found a roadside inn with a vacancy and a fireplace, then checked in without unpacking. The room had a window overlooking a gravel path lined with sugar maples. I sat by it that evening with a blanket over my lap and a cup of chamomile I didn't finish. For 2 days, I didn't check my phone. I didn't reply to the few texts that trickled in. Nothing from Mom, just a group message from Ryan asking if I'd gotten mixed up on the train schedule. No apology, just a soft punchline with an implied shrug. I left it unread. Instead, I walked through orchards, shedding their last red leaves, and browsed antique shops, selling things no one truly needed. I bought a postcard, but didn't write anything on it. I considered sending it to myself, then folded it into a book, and forgot it was there. I let the quiet settle inside me like something earned. For the first time in years, I didn't have to explain my silence or hold space for someone else's mess. I didn't have to adjust my tone, downplay my hurt, or tell myself I was being dramatic. I was alone, and it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. The trip I'd planned was gone. The people I'd planned it for had made their choice, and now I was making mine. I returned to my apartment late Tuesday afternoon. The sky was low and gray, the kind of quiet overcast that made the whole street feel like it was holding its breath. I dropped my bag by the door and didn't bother unpacking. Out of habit, I opened Facebook. Mom had posted again, 24 photos from the trip. She'd tagged Brian, Tiffany, and even the bed and breakfast. Not me. One image stopped me, the dinner table I had reserved months ago, candles flickering, a bouquet of goldenrod and asters in the center of my centerpiece. My reservation, my handwriting still faintly visible on the place cards. Tiffany sat where I was supposed to be. The caption read, "Grateful for our children who made this anniversary so special. Couldn't have asked for a more loving weekend." I closed the app dot the next morning. I received an email from Mom's shared account with Dad's. Subject line, photos from the trip. No message, just the images attached in bulk, as if I were a distant cousin who'd missed a reunion. "No, we missed you. No, where were you?" Just evidence. Proof that the weekend had happened without me. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was the family they'd chosen to show up for. The next day, I drove to my house. The one I'd bought 6 years ago, with my name on every document and every bill. The one I'd allowed them to live in rent-free. They weren't home. I walked through each room slowly. The guest towels I'd bought were faded. The kitchen smelled like someone else's cooking. Tiffany's raincoat hung on the banister. I stood in the dining room, the same room Mom had once called hers during a birthday toast. And I realized something so simple it felt like a revelation. They weren't renters. They were takers, and I was done offering. The lease adjustment notice went out the next morning. I printed 2 copies, one for the kitchen counter, the other mailed certified. It was clean, professional, no harsh language, just numbers and dates. The rent was now at market rate. Utilities were no longer bundled. Guest privileges were revoked unless approved in writing. There was a deadline, the 1st of the month. I didn't include a note. I didn't owe them one. That afternoon I received a call from Mom. She didn't start with, "Hello, Lauren." "What is this?" she demanded. "Are you seriously charging us rent?" There was no trace of confusion in her voice, only offense. "This is cruel," she continued. "Where are your parents?" I waited a beat before answering. Then maybe you should have. Treated me like your daughter. She scoffed. So this is about that trip. I said nothing. We didn't mean to hurt you, she added, her voice softening. It just happened. I could hear her walking through the living room, the creak of the old floorboard near the front window. Your father's upset, she said. But Robert hadn't called, hadn't texted. I wasn't sure if he even knew or cared. You could have just talked to us, she insisted. I could have. I chose this instead. You've got until the 1st, I said gently. After that, it becomes legal. You're not serious. I am. She hung up. For a long time, I stood at the kitchen sink and stared at the faucet. Not angry, not proud, just steady. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. But it wasn't theirs either. It had been a gift. Now, it was a boundary. The email arrived 3 days later from a local law office I didn't recognize. Subject, intent to dispute ownership. Inside was a scanned letter. My parents, through counsel, were asserting long-term financial contributions and shared occupancy, claiming partial rights to the house. No dollar amounts, no documents, just vague language meant to sound formal and intimidating. I forwarded it to my attorney. He called within the hour. There's nothing here, he said. They've got no legal standing. This is noise, but it wasn't just noise. It was confirmation. They weren't sorry. They were retaliating. Brian showed up the next evening. He looked like he hadn't slept. His usual careless swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, unfocused guilt. Tiff left, he said, standing awkwardly on the front step. Said she didn't sign up for all this family crap. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood there as if the door would open out of habit. I don't have anywhere to go, he added. You know that, right? I did, but I also knew what came next if I let him in. I'm not your safety net, I said. He looked down at his shoes, then back up, eyes glassy but dry. I didn't mean to hurt you, but he didn't say sorry, not really. And I didn't say anything at all. Dad never called. Not after the rent notice. Not after the legal letter. Not even when Brian showed up with nowhere to go. He didn't yell, didn't text, didn't ask me why. But that wasn't new. Growing up, his silence had always been the backdrop. When Mom pushed too hard, when Brian acted out, when I broke down under the weight of being the steady one, he'd just sip his coffee and disappear into the next room. His neutrality had a softness to it that made it feel harmless, almost gentle. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't gentleness. It was consent and silence. He had allowed it all to happen, every ask, every assumption, every time they took from me without thanks or pause. And now he was allowing this to happen too. The day I dropped off their certified notice, he was out front, watering the bushes. He looked up as I walked past. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. It was the only thing he'd said to me in weeks. I looked him in the eye and answered just as quietly, I do. He didn't respond. He just turned the hose back to the rose bush as if he hadn't heard anything at all. 3 weeks later, I moved into a small loft across the river. Exposed brick, high windows, just enough space for me and my quiet. No footsteps overhead, no doors slamming, no voices asking for something. I bought a secondhand couch, a real tea kettle, and a lamp I actually liked. The air smelled like dust and new paint. I opened the windows anyway. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for my phone to buzz. No group chats asking for grocery. Money, no guilt-soaked check-ins disguised as concern. Just mornings with my own schedule and evenings that belonged only to me. Brian hasn't texted since that last night on the porch. Tiffany deleted our photos and unfollowed the whole family. And my parents, well, they've gone quiet too. Mom tried one last time, a message with no greeting. We miss who you used to be. I replied, you miss the version of me who never said. No, she's gone. There was no answer after that dot. Sometimes I walk past the park near the train station and sit on the same bench where I read Brian's message the day they left me behind. I don't replay it anymore. I just sit because that's what peace feels like. Not a celebration, not revenge, just the absence of noise. I used to think saying no would make me heartless. Now I know it made me hold out last week. I booked a train to Maine. No itinerary, no group chat, no anniversary dinner to coordinate. Just me, a window seat, and a quiet town with a bookstore I've always wanted to visit. I didn't ask anyone's permission, didn't check anyone's calendar, didn't offer to bring souvenirs. I packed light, one bag, a notebook, and a sweater that bobbed it. Still smells faintly of cedar. At the station, I paused before boarding, just for a second, and let myself remember that morning in Vermont. The sting was gone. All that remained was clarity. I am not their fixer, not their fallback, not their foundation. I am not their plan B, I am my own beginning. There's a sticky note on my new bathroom mirror. Just 5 words I wrote after the move when the silence was still raw. I owe myself the most. And every morning I read it like a promise. Some stories aren't told for sympathy, they're told for recognition. If this one made something inside you stir, then maybe it wasn't just a story. Was there a moment you finally said, enough? Tell. US, your words might be the light someone else needs. If you've ever felt invisible in the family you built, subscribe to hear stories that don't just end, they free.